Vail. This is vailychat.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Oh, wow.
Okay. That is officially out of my system.
Are we not doing the rest of the vocal warm-up?
We are skipping the rest today, honestly, because the stack of sources sitting in front of us, it just requires us to jump straight into the deep end.
Fair enough.
So, welcome to a brand new, custom-tailored deep dive for you, our listener. Today is Monday, April 27, 2026, and we're tracking a really phenomenal through line today.
We really are.
It's all about the terrifying fragility of hyper-optimized systems.
Yeah, and it's a pretty sobering theme, honestly, because when you look at the raw data crossing our desks today, you see a world that has engineered itself for maximum efficiency.
Right.
And it does that by assuming that certain foundational variables are just, always going to be there, like a stable climate or predictable global shipping lanes or
secure perimeters.
Exactly.
Secure perimeters. And when those assumptions fail, I mean, the cascading effects are just immediate.
Yeah,
so we are unpacking a massive spectrum of sources today for you. We've got everything from federal security wires to geopolitical naval updates, all the way down to municipal operational reports out of the Rocky Mountains.
It's a huge spectrum.
It is. But to understand how these massive systems fracture, we have to start with the most hyper-optimized security environment imaginable. And that brings us to a massive breaking story out of the federal courts today.
Right, and before we get into the actual administrative breakdown of this event, I need to explicitly state something for you, the listener.
Yeah, please do.
The federal wires we are pulling from today contain some highly politically charged updates. And our role here is strictly to impartially report the facts and events as they appear in the source material.
Absolutely.
We are not taking political sides. We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints or actions we're about to discuss. Our lens today is purely logistical. We are just examining how extreme events force massive systems to adapt.
Exactly. So with that framework, let's unpack this. What are the federal filings showing us?
We are tracking formal charges against Cole Thomas Allen. He's a resident of Torrance, California. And the charges are for the attempted assassination of President Trump.
Wow.
And, crucially, the filings indicate this attempt took place during the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
I want to pause on that specific location because the mechanics of securing an event like the Correspondents' Dinner, it's almost unfathomable.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Right. You are dealing with a ballroom packed with essentially the highest density concentration of high-value targets in the country.
Oh, yeah. The executive branch, cabinet members, global media figures.
Everyone is in one room. So the Secret Service essentially has to build this impenetrable fortress inside a commercial hotel for just a few hours.
Yeah, and looking at the logistics of a breach at a heavily fortified soft target hybrid event like this, it completely upends their foundational threat model.
How so?
Well, security at that level is built on concentric rings, right?
Yeah.
You have the outer perimeter, you've got magnetometer checkpoints, credential verification, internal sweeps. If an attempted assassination actually occurs, it means there was a cascading failure through multiple rings of that hyper-optimized system.
Which means you can't just, fix it by adding a bunch more guards at the door.
Exactly. It forces an immediate, agonizing reappraisal of every single future event. The protocols themselves have to be rewritten in real time.
Because the assumption that a specific combination of background checks and physical barriers creates a sterile environment, that assumption just vanishes overnight.
It's gone.
It is a massive shock to the system. And what strikes me as we look through today's stack is that this kind of instant obsolescence, it isn't just happening in domestic security.
Not at all.
The exact same dynamic where a hyper-optimized system suddenly loses its foundational assumptions, that is playing out on a global scale right now in the Middle East.
Yeah, we are looking at some extreme escalation in the Strait of Hormuz.
Let's give some context for that.
Sure. So the Strait of Hormuz is basically the ultimate global choke point. A massive percentage of the world's liquid energy supply travels through this remarkably narrow channel of water.
Right.
And the entire global economy operates on the baseline assumption that that channel remains navigable.
But according to the international wires this morning, Iran has officially offered to reopen this vital shipping lane. But the caveat is immense.
Yeah, they will only reopen the strait if the United States completely lifts its naval blockade of Iranian ports.
And the briefings indicate President Trump is highly unlikely to accept that proposal.
Extremely unlikely.
So the diplomatic standoff is entrenched. But the tactical situation actually on the water has moved way beyond a simple standoff.
It has. This is where the logistics get genuinely terrifying. President Trump has issued a severe shoot-and-kill order directed at the U.S. Navy.
A shoot-and-kill order?
Yes. And the mandate specifically targets any Iranian small boats that attempt to block the strait or lay mines in the shipping lanes.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of why a shoot and kill order against, small boats fundamentally alters the security architecture there. Because a U.S. Navy Aegis destroyer is an engineering marvel.
Oh, absolutely. It's hyper-optimized to track and intercept supersonic anti-ship missiles from over the horizon. It is designed for blue water, open ocean combat.
But the Strait of Hormuz isn't the open ocean.
No, the navigable shipping lanes are incredibly narrow.
Precisely. It's like navigating a sheer cliff face in the dark. One wrong move and the whole global system buckles. In that confined environment, a multi-billion-dollar destroyer is suddenly threatened by asymmetrical warfare.
Right, you have swarms of fast, cheap fiberglass boats that might be carrying explosives or laying mines, and the reaction time for the Navy drops from minutes to milliseconds.
Which is terrifying.
A radar blip appears, and a ship's commander has to instantly determine if it is, a local fishing vessel or an incoming threat, and they have to do that knowing they have a direct shoot and kill mandate.
It completely inverts the power dynamic. The destroyer is this massive, heavily armored titan, but in a narrow strait, its size is actually a vulnerability.
Exactly. It physically cannot turn around quickly. Once a convoy is committed to the channel, they are trapped on a predetermined path.
And the fragility of that system just cannot be overstated. I mean, the global supply chain operates on a just-in-time model.
Yes.
Massive container ships and oil tankers are scheduled down to the hour. They rely entirely on predictability.
So if a single commercial vessel hits a mine because, say, one small boat slipped through that defensive screen, the cascading failure is instantaneous.
Lloyd's of London and the global maritime insurance markets would just immediately revoke coverage for the region.
Instantly. And then the ships simply stop moving. The physical supply of oil halts, energy prices spike globally, and that logistical shockwave hits every manufacturing plant and gas pump on the planet within days.
It is the ultimate example of a hyper-optimized system colliding with unpredictable friction. The maritime shipping industry assumed a baseline of security. And when that baseline is removed by asymmetrical warfare and shoot-to-kill mandates, the entire global economic machine seizes up.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. So we are looking at how global supply chains fracture when their foundational assumptions disappear. Let's pull this lens down from the macro level to the local level.
I'll do it.
Because you don't actually need a global naval blockade to witness this exact phenomenon. You just need a missing physical resource.
Yeah, that brings us to the final season metrics coming out of Vail Resorts for the 2025-2026 winter. And I have to say, the data is catastrophic.
It's really bad.
They're reporting a 25% collapse in skier visits across their Rocky Mountain resorts.
A 25% drop. A quarter of the customer base vanishing in a single season.
Yeah, and a nearly 15% drop across North America overall.
When you look at the mechanics of a resort town economy, it is just as hyper-optimized as a global shipping lane.
Oh, completely.
The entire financial ecosystem of the Eagle Valley is built on the singular assumption that a robust snowpack will arrive in November and last until late April.
And this year, that physical assumption completely evaporated. The underlying SNOTEL data in our sources explains the why behind this financial collapse.
Let's quickly explain SNOTEL for those unfamiliar with the mechanics of how we measure water in the West.
Sure, SNOTEL stands for snow telemetry. It's an automated network of sensors high in the mountains that measures not just the depth of the snow, but the snow water equivalent.
Right, the actual water content frozen in the pack.
Exactly. And the regional SNOTEL sites in the Eagle Valley recorded a 41-year historic low snowpack.
41 years.
But it wasn't just the lack of snow. It was the timing of the melt that triggered the systemic collapse. The data shows the region reached a total meltout on March 31.
March 31 is unprecedented.
It really is. In a normal, optimized year, that snowpack acts as a massive frozen reservoir. It sustains the spring skiing economy all through April, and then gradually melts throughout the summer to sustain the rivers, the agriculture, the municipal water supplies.
So reaching total meltout by the end of March means the physical asset the entire valley relies upon literally vanished overnight.
Yes, and as a direct result, Vail Mountain was forced to terminate its ski season weeks early. They officially closed the lifts on Wednesday, April 8th.
Wow.
And Beaver Creek closed even earlier on March 29th.
Think about the cascading failure this triggers within the local economy. It goes so far beyond just a ski company losing ticket sales.
Oh, the ripple effects are massive.
Walk us through that domino effect. How does an early mountain closure actually break the municipal machine?
Well, it starts with the labor force. A resort town relies on thousands of seasonal workers. You've got lift operators, ski instructors, hospitality staff.
Right.
And these workers sign housing leases and calculate their personal finances based on a season that historically ends in late April. So when the lift stops spinning on April 8th, the hourly wages stop. But the rent for April is still due. You suddenly have a massive segment of your population facing immediate financial insolvency.
And that cascades instantly to the local businesses, I'd imagine.
Exactly. The restaurants in the village operate on incredibly tight margins. They order highly perishable inventory, like food and beverages, weeks in advance, anticipating the massive crowds of spring break and late-season skiers.
And when the mountain closes, those crowds just vanish.
They're gone. The restaurants are left with tens of thousands of dollars in rotting inventory and empty dining rooms. They miss their revenue projections, which means they cannot pay their vendors, creating a secondary shockwave down the supply chain.
But the deepest fracture, that hits the local government.
Right.
Because towns like Vail and Avon don't fund their infrastructure primarily through property taxes?
No, they rely heavily on sales tax revenue generated during those peak winter months.
Exactly. The municipal budgets are engineered years in advance based on the assumption of April sales tax receipts. So when Vail Resorts loses 25% of its skier visits, the towns lose a proportional chunk of their operating budget.
And suddenly, the funding for summer road repairs, or new public transit buses, or emergency services, it faces a massive shortfall. The hyper-optimized machine just grinds to a halt because the foundational variable, the snow, did not perform as expected.
Which brings us to the most fascinating part of today's deep dive, I think. The adaptation phase.
Yes. How do they respond?
When a region's primary economic engine stalls out and the physical climate changes literally underneath their feet, the community cannot just sit there. They have to physically and administratively reshape their geographic footprint to survive.
And we are seeing this real-time adaptation unfold in the community of Edwards right now. The sources detailed the debut of a brand new facility in the Edwards core called the Eagle County Commons.
This is a classic consolidation move. The Eagle County Commons is designed as a centralized one-stop shop for county services. And simultaneously, the old Avon Annex is permanently closing its doors in early May, shifting all of its operations over to this new Edwards facility.
To understand why a local government goes through the logistical nightmare of relocating and consolidating services, you have to look back at the financial stress we just discussed.
Right, the missing tax revenue.
When a municipality is staring down a 25% drop in its primary economic driver, maintaining scattered, redundant facilities is a luxury it can no longer afford.
You survive a massive revenue shock by slashing your overhead. By centralizing operations into the Eagle County Commons, they are abandoning the old map.
They have to.
They reduce their real estate footprint, they streamline their staffing models, and they consolidate their utility costs. It is a pragmatic, hyper-efficient retreat into a dense central core.
It really is the administrative equivalent of drawing the wagons into a circle. By making Edwards the singular hub for permits, records, and health services, they are forcing the system to operate more efficiently under extreme resource constraints.
Okay, so you paint this picture of a community pragmatically retreating into a highly efficient core to survive. But centralizing sounds incredibly efficient, but aren't we seeing massive friction when new developments encroach too far into the valley? You can't just pave over paradise without a fight.
Oh, absolutely not. And your pushback is completely validated by the other filings in our stack,
Right.
specifically regarding the Burlemont estates.
Right.
We are seeing the exact opposite dynamic playing out simultaneously there. There is a massive contradictory push to expand deeper into the wilderness.
And the Burlemont Estates controversy perfectly encapsulates the tension tearing at these mountain communities right now.
It really does. For context, Burlemont is a proposed luxury development located on a parcel of land high above Edwards.
And the flashpoint of this controversy isn't necessarily the homes themselves, it is the infrastructure required to reach them.
The access road.
Exactly. To build and service this development, developers need to construct a newly paved access road through miles of pristine, currently undisturbed national forest land.
And this is where the ecological realities collide violently with the desire for expansion. Federal lawmakers, specifically Senators Bennett and Neguse, have just introduced a bill explicitly designed to block funding for this access road.
Having federal senators introduce legislation to block a local access road, that shows how astronomically high the stakes have become.
It's a huge escalation.
Let's look at the mechanics of why a single paved road in a national forest triggers federal intervention.
Well, we have to connect this back to the SNOTEL data we discussed earlier. The environment is not operating under normal conditions right now.
Right, the early melt.
A total snow meltdown on March 31 means the soil moisture is completely depleted months ahead of schedule. The vegetation is drying out, the entire ecosystem is highly stressed and vulnerable.
And when you introduce a paved road into a drought-stressed environment, you are not just laying down a strip of asphalt, you are permanently altering the hydrology of the mountain.
Exactly.
Rain and moisture no longer soak into the soil. They run off the impermeable pavement, which just exacerbates the localized drought conditions.
You are also introducing severe edge effects into the habitat. A continuous stream of vehicular traffic brings noise pollution that alters the mating and migration patterns of local ungulates, like elk and deer.
whose caloric reserves are already depleted from the harsh winter and dry spring?
Precisely. You are introducing chemical runoff from the asphalt, from vehicle exhaust, from the construction process, directly into a watershed that is already starving for volume. It fragments the wilderness entirely.
So the community, backed by Bennett and Agus, is looking at this fragile, hyper-stressed environment and essentially declaring that the system cannot absorb any more impact.
It highlights a massive identity crisis for how these regions adapt. On one hand, you have the Eagle County Commons, a smart, dense, centralized adaptation to economic pressure.
Yep.
On the other hand, you have the Burlamont Estates pushing outward, expanding the human footprint into highly vulnerable, drought-stricken terrain.
And the 41-year low snowpack is an accelerant. It speeds up the timeline for every single conflict over land, water, and development.
Without a doubt. When resources are abundant, perhaps an access road doesn't trigger federal legislation. But when the snow is gone in March, every single drop of water, every acre of undisturbed habitat becomes a fiercely contested resource.
It's all connected. So if we synthesize everything we've unpacked today, a very stark, cohesive picture emerges.
It does.
We started by looking at the highest echelons of domestic security being breached, forcing an instant rewrite of protective protocols. We looked at a multi-billion-dollar Navy destroyer trapped in a narrow strait, its massive technological advantage neutralized by cheap asymmetrical swarms.
And then we examined the financial collapse of a hyper-optimized resort economy when its foundational physical asset, the snow, melted a month early.
Right.
And finally, we looked at a community simultaneously trying to retreat into a centralized core while fighting off expansion into a fragile wilderness.
The through line is undeniable here. The old assumptions are just obsolete. You cannot rely on a sterile security perimeter. You cannot assume a global shipping lane will remain passive.
And you cannot build a municipal budget based on May snowmelt.
Exactly. The baseline of normalcy has fundamentally shifted beneath our feet. And when the baseline shifts, the mechanisms of society, our military doctrines, our supply chains, our local zoning laws, they experience cascading failures.
And they're all scrambling to adapt to a reality they were not engineered for.
Which leaves me with a final, I think, pretty profound thought for you to mull over today. We have built our entire modern civilization on the concept of long-term planning.
We really have.
We engineer 5-year municipal budgets, 10-year military procurement cycles, and 30-year municipal bonds, all based on the assumption that tomorrow will look roughly like yesterday.
Right.
But as we watch the snow disappear overnight and global maritime chokeholds escalate by the hour, I have to ask, is the era of the long-term plan officially dead?
Well, if the variables are changing faster than the systems can process them, long-term optimization becomes a vulnerability, not a strength.
Exactly. If you are a global shipping CEO, how do you plan a supply chain when a vital strait could be shut down by a fiberglass boat tomorrow?
You can't.
If you are a resort executive, how do you issue a 30-year bond when the winter might only last 3 months? Are we moving into an era where we must completely abandon the illusion of predictability?
That's the real question.
An era where we have to stop trying to optimize for the future and instead learn to thrive in a state of permanent, real-time reaction.
It requires a massive psychological shift. Agility, not efficiency, becomes the only true form of security.
When the path ahead vanishes, you can't plan 10 steps out. You can only react to the ground immediately beneath your feet. It is a terrifying, but perhaps absolutely necessary evolution in how we operate.
It's going to be fascinating to watch it unfold.
It really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this custom deep dive. We covered a massive amount of logistical ground today, from the chaotic waters of the Persian Gulf to the shifting soil of the Rockies. Keep mulling over that idea of permanent reaction. Keep questioning those foundational assumptions, and we will catch you on the next one.